Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel EnglishPulse. Today, I want to talk about something very interesting. We will talk about learning English while sleeping. Many people hear this idea and become curious. They wonder if it is really possible to improve their English while they sleep. They wonder if listening to English during the night can help them learn faster. In this chapter, we will explore this idea together. We will learn what happens when we sleep, how our brains work during sleep, and how listening to English at night can become a helpful part of your learning journey. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I met a student named Ali. Ali wanted to learn English, but he had a busy life. He worked during the day and spent time with his family in the evening. He often felt tired when it was time to study. Even though he wanted to improve, he felt like there were not enough hours in the day. One evening, while watching a video about language learning, he heard someone talk about listening to English while sleeping. The idea sounded unusual, but he decided to try it. That night, Ali played a simple English audio recording before going to bed. The recording contained basic vocabulary, common sentences, and slow conversations. He set the volume low so it would not disturb his sleep. Then he closed his eyes and went to sleep. The next morning, he did not suddenly become fluent. He did not wake up speaking perfect English. However, he felt more familiar with some of the words he had heard before. This encouraged him to continue. Now, let us talk about sleep. Sleep is very important for learning. When we sleep, our brains do not simply turn off. In fact, the brain remains very active. During sleep, the brain organizes information and stores memories. Think about all the things you learn during the day. New words, new sentences, and new ideas enter your mind. While you sleep, your brain works to process this information. It decides what is important and helps move information into long-term memory. Scientists have spent many years studying sleep and learning. They discovered that sleep plays a big role in memory. When we learn something new, and then get good sleep, we often remember it better. This is why students are usually advised to sleep well before an exam. A tired brain struggles to remember information, but a rested brain works much better. This brings us back to English learning. If sleep helps memory, then listening to English before or during sleep may support the learning process. Notice the word support. It is important to understand that sleeping alone will not teach you a language. You cannot simply play English audio every night and expect to become fluent without any effort. Learning English still requires practice, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. However, sleep listening can become an extra tool that helps reinforce what you already learn. I remember trying this method myself. Before going to sleep, I listened to simple English stories. The stories were easy to understand and used common vocabulary. At first, I thought nothing was happening. The next day seemed normal. But after several weeks, I noticed something interesting. Certain phrases felt more familiar. Some expressions came to my mind more quickly. It was not magic. It was not instant learning. It was simply repeated exposure to the language. Exposure is one of the most important parts of language learning. The more often you hear English, the more comfortable it becomes. Imagine meeting a stranger for the first time. At first, that person feels unfamiliar. But if you see them every day, you become comfortable with them. Words work in a similar way. The more often you hear them, the more familiar they become. Listening during sleep can increase your exposure to English without requiring extra effort during your busy day. Another reason people enjoy sleep learning is that it helps create a positive environment. Many learners feel stressed about studying. They worry about grammar mistakes. They worry about pronunciation. They worry about speaking perfectly. But when they listen while sleeping, there is no pressure. There are no tests. There are no grades. There is only gentle exposure to the language. This relaxed approach can help some learners feel more comfortable with English. Let me tell you another story. A student named Sarah struggled with listening comprehension. Whenever she watched English videos, she felt overwhelmed. People seemed to speak too quickly. She could not catch many words. She decided to spend 30 minutes listening to simple English before sleeping each night. She continued her normal studies during the day, but she added this small habit to her routine. After a few months, she noticed that English sounds no longer felt so unfamiliar. She could recognize more words and follow conversations more easily. One important thing to remember is choosing the right audio. If the audio is too difficult, it may not be helpful. Beginners should listen to simple English stories, basic conversations, and common vocabulary. Intermediate learners can listen to graded readers, everyday dialogues, and slow podcasts. The goal is not to challenge yourself with difficult material while sleeping. The goal is to surround your mind with understandable English. Consistency is also important. One night of listening will not change your life. Learning happens through repeated practice. Just as a plant needs water every day to grow, your English skills need regular exposure. Listening occasionally may help a little, but listening consistently can provide better results over time. As we begin this journey together, remember something very important. Learning English while sleeping is not a shortcut. It is not a secret trick that replaces real study. Instead, it is a helpful habit that can support your learning. Think of it as an extra layer of practice. During the day, you study and practice. During the night, you continue surrounding yourself with English. Together, these habits can help you make steady progress. What happens inside your brain while you sleep? We will talk about what happens inside your brain while you sleep and why sleep is one of the most powerful tools for learning. Let me start with a story. A student named Ahmed loved learning English. Every day he studied new vocabulary, listened to stories, and practiced speaking. However, he often felt frustrated. He worked hard, but sometimes it seemed like he forgot words very quickly. One evening, his teacher gave him some simple advice. The teacher said, "Study your English, then make sure you get a good night's sleep." Ahmed was surprised. He expected advice about grammar or vocabulary, not sleep. But he decided to follow the suggestion. After several weeks, Ahmed noticed something remarkable. Words stayed in his memory longer. New expressions became easier to remember. The amount of study he did remained the same, but his brain seemed to use the information more effectively. The difference was not a new learning method. The difference was better sleep. Now let us talk about the brain. Your brain is one of the most amazing parts of your body. It works every second of every day. Even when you are sleeping, your brain remains active. Many people imagine sleep as a period when everything shuts down, but that is not true. While your body rests, your brain performs many important tasks. Think of your brain as a giant library. Every day, new information enters this library. You learn new words. You hear new sounds. You discover new grammar patterns. All of this information needs to be organized. And picks and icks. If the library simply threw books everywhere, it would become impossible to find anything. In the same way, your brain needs time to organize the information you learn. Sleep is when much of this organization happens. During sleep, your brain reviews information from the day. It strengthens important memories and removes unnecessary details. This process helps you remember what you learned. It is one reason why sleep is so important for students, professionals, and language learners. Scientists have discovered that sleep occurs in different stages. Some stages involve light sleep. Others involve deep sleep. Others involve deep sleep. There is also a stage called REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep. During REM sleep, your brain becomes very active. Dreams often occur during this stage. Each stage of sleep plays a different role in helping your brain process information. Imagine that during the day you learn 10 new English words. You repeat them several times and write them in a notebook. At first, these words are stored as fresh information. They are new and somewhat fragile. Without proper sleep, your brain may struggle to keep them. But when you sleep, your brain strengthens these memories. The words become easier to recall the next day. I remember learning new vocabulary when I was studying a language. Sometimes I spent an hour memorizing words. If I stayed awake very late and did not sleep enough, I often forgot many of them. But when I studied and then slept well, I remembered much more. This experience taught me how important sleep really is. Now, let us connect this idea to learning English while sleeping. Some researchers believe that hearing information during sleep may help reinforce memories that were already learned while awake. In simple terms, if you study English during the day and then hear similar English audio while sleeping, your brain may become more familiar with that information. This is why many learners choose to listen to vocabulary lists, simple stories, or common phrases during the night. However, it is important to have realistic expectations. Your sleeping brain does not learn in the same way your awake brain learns. You still need active study. You still need to read, listen, write, and speak. Sleep listening works best as a support system, not as a replacement for learning. Let me tell you about Sarah again. After she started listening to English before sleep, she also made sure to study during the day. She learned 5 new words every morning. Then, at night, she listened to simple English recordings containing similar vocabulary. After several months, she noticed that those words became easier to recognize in conversations. She did not become fluent overnight, but her progress became more consistent. Another interesting thing about sleep is that it helps reduce mental fatigue. When your brain becomes tired, learning becomes harder, concentration decreases, memory becomes weaker, mistakes become more common. Good sleep refreshes your mind. It prepares your brain to learn again the next day. This means that sleep is not only helping you remember old information, it is also helping you learn new information more effectively. Think about a smartphone. If you use it all day without charging it, the battery becomes weak. Eventually, the phone stops working properly. Your brain is similar. Sleep is like recharging the battery. Without enough sleep, your mental energy decreases. With good sleep, your brain functions much better. Many successful language learners understand this principle. They do not simply focus on studying harder. They focus on studying smarter. They know that rest is part of learning. They understand that a healthy brain learns more efficiently than an exhausted one. As you continue your English journey, remember that every hour of sleep is helping your brain process what you learned. Every night, your brain is working behind the scenes. It is organizing information, strengthening memories, and preparing you for future learning. Learning. When combined with regular English practice, good sleep becomes a powerful partner in your success. Chapter 3. The perfect sleep learning environment. We will learn how to create the perfect sleep learning environment and how to choose the best English audio for nighttime listening. Nighttime. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Hassan was excited about the idea of learning English while sleeping. After hearing about it online, he immediately downloaded several English recordings. That night, he played them at a very high volume and went to bed. The next morning, he felt tired and annoyed. He had woken him several times during the night because the audio was too loud. Instead of helping him learn, the experience made him uncomfortable. A few days later, Hassan decided to try again. This time, he lowered the volume, selected a calm recording, and created a peaceful environment before bed. The result was very different. He slept better, felt refreshed in the morning, and enjoyed the experience much more. This taught him an important lesson. The way you prepare for sleep matters just as much as the audio you choose. Now let us talk about your sleep environment. Sleep is one of the most important parts of a healthy life. If your sleep quality suffers, your learning may suffer as well. The goal is not simply to play English audio all night. The goal is to create conditions that support both good sleep and gentle language exposure. Start by making your bedroom comfortable. Keep the room clean and organized. A peaceful environment helps the mind relax. If possible, keep the room slightly cool. Many people sleep better in a cool environment than in a warm one. Also, reduce unnecessary noise and distractions. Lighting is important too. Bright lights can make it harder for your brain to prepare for sleep. Before bedtime, try to reduce exposure to bright screens and strong lights. Give your mind time to relax. Some learners listen to English audio for 15 or 20 minutes before sleeping, and then allow the recording to continue quietly during the night. Now let us talk about volume. This is one of the most important factors. Many beginners make the mistake of setting the audio too loud. They believe louder audio will produce better results. However, the opposite is often true. Loud sounds can disturb your sleep and reduce its quality. Imagine trying to sleep while someone is speaking loudly next to your bed. You would probably wake up repeatedly throughout the night. This is why your English audio should be soft and gentle. The sound should be comfortable and relaxing. You should barely notice it as you drift off to sleep. I remember experimenting with different volume levels when I first tried sleep listening. At first, I set the volume too high. I thought it would help me absorb more English. Instead, it distracted me. Eventually, I reduced the volume to a soft background level. That small change made the experience much more pleasant. Next, let us discuss the type of audio you should choose. Not all English content is suitable for sleep learning. Fast conversations, loud music, dramatic movies, or energetic podcasts may not be the best choices. They can stimulate the brain too much and make relaxation difficult. Instead, choose calm and simple content. Beginners may benefit from slow English stories, common vocabulary recordings, simple conversations, and graded readers. The language should be easy enough to understand when you are awake. Remember, the goal is familiarity and exposure, not difficulty. For example, imagine listening to a simple story about a family going to the park. The vocabulary is common. The sentences are short and clear. You hear words such as family, park, walk, tree, happy, and picnic. Because these words appear repeatedly, they become more familiar over time. Intermediate learners can choose slightly more advanced material. They may listen to simple podcasts, everyday dialogues, or longer stories. However, the content should still be relaxing and easy to follow. Avoid recordings that require intense concentration. Another useful tip is to focus on material that matches your learning goals. If you are working on everyday conversation, choose recordings with common conversational phrases. If you want to improve your listening skills, select stories and dialogues. If your goal is vocabulary growth, choose recordings that introduce useful words and expressions. Numting sapatang, Tatacias. Let me tell you about a learner named Maria. She wanted to improve her understanding of everyday English. During the day, she studied common expressions such as, "How are you?" "What are you doing?" and "See you later." At night, she listened to recordings that included these same expressions. After several weeks, the phrases felt much more natural to her. She recognized them quickly whenever she heard them. Consistency is another key factor. Many people try a method for 1 or 2 nights and then give up. Learning English is not about quick results. It is about steady progress. If you decide to use sleep listening, make it part of a regular routine. Small improvements can become significant over time. A good bedtime routine might look something like this. First, review a few English words or sentences during the evening. Next, prepare your room for sleep. Then, play a calm English recording at a low volume. Finally, relax and allow yourself to fall asleep naturally. This simple routine combines active learning with passive exposure. It is also important to pay attention to your own experience. Everyone is different. Some people enjoy having audio play throughout the night. Others prefer listening only while falling asleep. Experiment and discover what works best for you. The most effective method is the one that supports both learning and healthy sleep. Remember, sleep quality should always come first. If nighttime audio causes discomfort or disrupts your rest, adjust your approach. Learning English should help you, not make you tired. Good sleep remains one of the most powerful tools for memory and learning. As we finish this chapter, remember that success comes from creating the right environment. A comfortable room, a calm atmosphere, soft audio, and consistent practice can make sleep, listening a valuable addition to your English learning routine. Chapter 4: The Best English Audio for Beginners. We will discuss one of the most important topics of all. We will learn how to choose the best English audio for beginners and why the right audio can make a big difference in your learning journey. Let me start with a story. A learner named Bilal was very motivated to improve his English. He heard that listening to English while sleeping could be helpful, so he searched for some recordings online. Unfortunately, he chose advanced business presentations and fast-paced news reports. The speakers talked quickly and used difficult vocabulary. Bilal could hardly understand anything when he listened during the day, let alone while sleeping. After a few weeks, he felt disappointed. He thought the method was not working. Then, a friend gave him some advice. His friend suggested listening to simple stories instead. Bilal followed the advice and switched to beginner-level recordings. The stories were easy to follow and used everyday vocabulary. After a few months, he noticed that many words sounded familiar. He felt more comfortable with English and more confident in his studies. This experience teaches us an important lesson. The best audio is not always the most advanced audio. The best audio is the one that matches your current level. Now let us talk about why simple English is so important. Imagine that someone gives you a book written in a language you do not know. Even if you read it every day, you will learn very little because the content is too difficult. The same thing can happen with listening. If the audio is far beyond your level, your brain cannot easily connect with the information. On the other hand, when the language is simple and understandable, your brain begins to recognize patterns. You hear familiar words again and again. You notice common sentence structures. Gradually, English starts to feel more natural. One of the best choices for beginners is simple English stories. Stories are powerful learning tools because they combine vocabulary, grammar, and meaning in a natural way. Instead of memorizing isolated words, you hear words being used in real situations. Monbuktasapin. For example, imagine listening to a story about a young boy named Adam. Adam wakes up in the morning, eats breakfast, goes to school, and meets his friends. Throughout the story, you hear common words such as morning, breakfast, school, friend, happy, and teacher. Because these words appear within a meaningful story, They become easier to remember. I remember listening to simple English stories when I was learning a language. At first, I understood only a few words, but because the stories were easy and repetitive, I gradually understood more and more. The repeated exposure helped me build confidence. Another excellent choice is basic vocabulary recordings. These recordings focus on common words that learners use every day. You may hear words related to family, food, work, travel, weather, and daily activities. For example, a vocabulary recording might include words such as mother, father, brother, sister, house, kitchen, water, food, and school. These are words that appear frequently in everyday conversations. Hearing them regularly helps strengthen your familiarity with them. Simple conversations are also very useful. Real-life dialogues help you learn how people actually speak. You hear greetings, questions, answers, and common expressions. Imagine hearing a conversation like this: "Hello. How are you today?" "I am fine. How about you?" "I am doing well, thank you." Wort tamper Rotterdams passen. These conversations may seem simple, but they teach important communication patterns. Over time, these patterns become familiar and easier to understand. Another great option is graded readers. Graded readers are stories written specifically for language learners. The vocabulary and grammar are carefully controlled to match different levels. This makes them easier to understand than regular books. Many learners enjoy graded readers because they provide interesting stories without overwhelming difficulty. They are designed to help learners succeed. If you can find audio versions of graded readers, they can become excellent sleep learning material. But let me tell you about a student named Ayesha. She struggled with understanding spoken English. Whenever she watched movies, she became confused because people spoke too quickly. One day, she discovered graded reader audio recordings. Lay qualmed. The speakers talked slowly and clearly. The stories were easy to follow. She listened every night before sleeping. After several months, she found that regular English conversations felt less intimidating. Her listening confidence improved greatly. Now let us discuss what you should avoid. Beginners should generally avoid content that is too fast, too complicated, or too emotional. Action movies, political debates, advanced lectures, and complicated news programs may not be ideal choices. These types of recordings often contain difficult vocabulary and rapid speech. Music can be enjoyable, but not all songs are suitable for learning while sleeping. Some songs contain unclear pronunciation, slang, or unusual grammar. While music can certainly support learning, spoken English is often more effective for nighttime listening. Another useful tip is repetition. Do not worry about listening to the same recording multiple times. Many learners think they always need new material. However, repetition is one of the most powerful learning tools available. Think about how children learn language. They hear the same words repeatedly. They listen to the same stories many times. This repetition helps build familiarity and understanding. The same principle applies to English learners. I remember listening to the same short story for several days in a row. At first, I noticed only a few words. Then I began understanding sentences. Eventually, I could follow the entire story comfortably. Repetition turned something unfamiliar into something familiar. It is also helpful to choose audio that you genuinely enjoy. If you enjoy the content, you are more likely to continue listening consistently. Consistency matters far more than perfection. Small daily habits often produce the greatest long-term results. Thirka. As you continue your English learning journey, remember that the goal is not to impress yourself with difficult content. The goal is to build a strong foundation. Simple stories, basic vocabulary, everyday conversations, and graded readers provide that foundation. They help your brain become comfortable with English one step at a time. Chapter 5. How repetition during sleep can strengthen your English memory. We will talk about one of the most powerful learning tools of all. We will learn about repetition and how repeated exposure to English can help strengthen your memory over time. Let me begin with a story. A student named Umar wanted to improve his English vocabulary. Every week, he learned dozens of new words. He wrote them in a notebook and studied them carefully. However, after a few days, he often forgot many of them. This made him feel frustrated. He worked hard, but the words seemed to disappear from his memory. One day, his teacher asked him a simple question. How many times do you review the words after learning them? Umar thought for a moment and replied, Usually only once. His teacher smiled and explained that learning is not just about seeing something one time. It is about seeing it many times. The teacher encouraged him to listen to recordings containing those words repeatedly, including before bedtime. Umar followed the advice. Every evening, he reviewed his vocabulary and listened to recordings containing the same words. After several weeks, something interesting happened. The words started feeling familiar. He could remember them more easily and recognize them faster when reading or listening. The difference was repetition. Now, let us talk about why repetition is so important. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. You hear their name once and then leave. A few days later, talk. A few days later, you may forget their name. But if you see that person every day for a month, you will almost certainly remember it. It happens with English words. When your brain encounters information repeatedly, it begins to treat that information as important. The repeated exposure strengthens the memory. Over time, the information becomes easier to recall. This process happens gradually. It is not instant, but it is very effective. I remember learning new vocabulary when I was studying a language. Sometimes I felt discouraged because I could not remember every word immediately. Then I realized that the words I remembered best were the ones I had seen and heard many times. Repetition was the key. The more often I encountered a word, the more natural it became. Think about the word beautiful. If you hear it only once, it may not stay in your memory for long. But if you hear it in stories, conversations, recordings, and daily practice, your brain starts recognizing it instantly. Eventually, you no longer need to think about it. The word becomes part of your vocabulary. This is one reason why sleep listening can be helpful. When you listen to familiar English recordings repeatedly, you increase your exposure to important words and phrases. Your brain hears them again and again. While this does not replace active study, it can reinforce what you have already learned. Let us look at a simple example. Imagine that during the day you learn 5 new words: travel, journey, ticket, airport, and suitcase. Later that evening, you listen to a short story about a traveler preparing for a trip. The story uses these same words several times. During the night, you continue hearing the recording softly in the background. The next day, those words may feel more familiar because you have encountered them multiple times. Another benefit of repetition is that it helps improve listening confidence. While many English learners feel overwhelmed when they hear native speakers. They think people speak too fast. However, repeated listening can help train your ears. At first, a sentence may sound difficult. For example, someone says, "I'm looking forward to meeting you." The first time you hear it, it may seem unclear. The second time, you recognize a few words. The third time, you understand most of the sentence. After hearing it many times, the entire expression becomes familiar. A learner named Fatima experienced this herself. She often listened to simple English dialogues before sleeping. At first, she understood very little, but she listened to the same dialogues repeatedly for several weeks. Gradually, the conversations became easier to understand. Phrases that once sounded confusing began to feel natural. Repetition transformed unfamiliar sounds into recognizable language. One mistake many learners make is constantly searching for new material. They finish one recording and immediately move to another. While variety can be useful, there is also great value in revisiting the same content. Think of learning as building a path through a forest. The first time you walk the path, it is difficult. The ground is rough, and the way is unclear. But every time you walk the same path, it becomes easier. Eventually, the path becomes smooth and familiar. Repetition creates the same effect in your brain. This is why children often enjoy hearing the same story again and again. Adults sometimes find this surprising, but repetition helps children learn language naturally. Each time they hear the story, their understanding grows. English learners can benefit from the same principle. Another advantage of repetition is that it reduces stress. When you listen to familiar recordings, you feel more comfortable. You are not constantly struggling to understand new content. Instead, you strengthen your understanding of material you already know. This creates confidence, and confidence is a powerful part of language learning. However, balance is important. You do not need to listen to the same recording forever. After becoming comfortable with a story or dialogue, you can gradually introduce new material. The goal is to combine repetition with steady progress. A simple routine might look like this. During the day, learn a small group of new words or phrases. In the evening, review them briefly. Then listen to a recording that contains those words. Repeat the process for several days. This combination of study and repetition can help strengthen your memory significantly. As we finish this chapter, Remember that repetition is not boring. Repetition is one of the most effective ways to learn. Every time you hear an English word, phrase, or sentence, you give your brain another opportunity to remember it. Over time, these repeated encounters build familiarity, confidence, and stronger language skills. Chapter 6. Training your ears and improving pronunciation. While you sleep, we will discuss another exciting benefit of listening to English regularly. We will learn how sleep listening can help train your ears and support better pronunciation. Let me start with a story. A learner named Zane knew many English words. He studied vocabulary every day and could read simple books without much difficulty. However, he faced a problem. Whenever he listened to native English speakers, he struggled to understand them. The words seemed to blend together. Even familiar vocabulary sounded different when spoken quickly. One evening, Zane decided to add English listening to his daily routine. During the day, he listened actively and paid attention to pronunciation. At night, he played simple English stories at a low volume while sleeping. After several months, he noticed something surprising. English speech no longer sounded like a blur of unfamiliar sounds. He began recognizing words more quickly and understanding conversations more easily. Now let us talk about why this happens. Language is not only about words. It is also about sounds. Every language has its own rhythm, stress patterns, and pronunciation rules. Rational. When you learn English, your ears must become familiar with these sounds. Think about a musician learning a new instrument. At first, every note may sound similar, but after listening carefully for many months, the musician learns to recognize small differences. Language learning works in a similar way. The more English you hear, the better your ears become at recognizing English sounds. I remember when I first started learning a foreign language. Native speakers seemed to talk incredibly fast. I felt like they were speaking one long word instead of separate words. But after months of listening, something changed. My ears became more sensitive to the language. I started hearing individual words more clearly. What once sounded confusing became understandable. English has many sounds that may not exist in your native language. Some learners struggle to hear the difference between similar sounds. Others find certain words difficult to pronounce. This is perfectly normal. Pronunciation develops through repeated exposure and practice. For example, consider the words ship and sheep. To many beginners, these words sound almost identical. However, native speakers hear a clear difference. The more often you hear these sounds used naturally, the easier it becomes to recognize them. Well, this is where listening can help. Every time you hear English, your brain receives information about pronunciation. You hear how words are stressed. You hear where speakers pause. You hear how sounds connect together in natural speech. Imagine listening to a simple sentence such as, "I would like a cup of coffee." At first, you may focus only on the meaning, but after hearing the sentence many times, you begin noticing how it sounds. You notice the rhythm. You notice the pronunciation. You notice which words receive more emphasis. A learner named Nadia discovered this for herself. She often felt nervous about speaking English. because she worried about pronunciation mistakes. To improve, she started listening to simple English dialogues every day. She also listened to them quietly while falling asleep. Over time, she became more familiar with the sounds of English. When she spoke, her pronunciation became smoother and more natural. Now, it is important to understand something. Listening while sleeping alone will not magically improve pronunciation. Pronunciation improves most when listening is combined with active practice. During the day, you should repeat words, read aloud, and imitate native speakers. The nighttime listening simply increases your exposure to correct pronunciation patterns. Think of it like learning a song. If you hear a song many times, the melody becomes familiar. Eventually, you can sing parts of it without much effort. Language works in a similar way. Repeated listening helps your brain become familiar with how English should sound. Another important aspect of pronunciation is rhythm. English has a unique rhythm that can feel very different from other languages. Some words are stressed more strongly than others. Certain syllables receive more emphasis. Listening regularly helps you develop a natural sense of this rhythm. For example, native speakers often stress important words in a sentence. In the sentence, "I really enjoyed the movie yesterday," the words really, enjoyed, movie, and yesterday may receive more emphasis than smaller words such as I and the. By hearing these patterns repeatedly, your brain starts recognizing them automatically. Listening also helps improve what many teachers call your language ear. Your language ear is your ability to hear and understand spoken language. The stronger your language ear becomes, the easier it is to follow conversations, movies, podcasts, and everyday speech. Let me tell you about another learner named Hassan. He loved watching English videos, but he often needed subtitles. Without subtitles, he felt lost. He began listening to simple English stories every night. After several months, he noticed that he relied less on subtitles. His listening confidence improved because his ears had become more accustomed to English sounds. One useful strategy is to choose audio with clear pronunciation. Slow stories, graded readers, and beginner-friendly dialogues are excellent choices. The speakers usually pronounce words carefully, making them easier to follow. This gives your ears a strong foundation. Another helpful tip is to listen to the same audio multiple times. Repetition allows you to notice details that you missed before. The first time, you may focus on understanding the story. The second time, you may notice pronunciation patterns. The third time, you may recognize the rhythm of the sentences. Remember that progress often happens gradually. You may not notice changes after a single night or even a single week, but over time, your listening skills can improve significantly. Small improvements add up. Every hour of exposure helps your ears become more comfortable with English. Masha, as we finish this chapter, remember that language learning is not only about memorizing vocabulary and grammar. It is also about training your ears. The more English you hear, the more natural it becomes. Listening during sleep can provide additional exposure that supports your learning. journey and helps you become more familiar with the sounds and pronunciation of English. Check. Creating the perfect daily routine for learning English while sleeping. We will learn how to create a complete daily routine that combines daytime study with nighttime listening for better results. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Farhan wanted to improve his English quickly. He was very motivated and spent several hours studying one day. He read articles, watched videos, memorized vocabulary, and practiced grammar exercises. By the end of the day, he felt exhausted. The next day, he was too tired to study. Then he skipped another day. Soon, his learning routine disappeared. A few weeks later, Farhan changed his approach. Instead of studying for many hours at once, he created a simple daily routine. He studied a little every day and listened to English before sleeping. This routine was easy to follow, and because it was consistent, he made much better progress. This teaches us an important success in language learning does not come from doing a huge amount of work. Occasionally, success comes from small actions repeated consistently over time. Now let us talk about why routines are so powerful. Imagine you want to grow a plant. You do not pour a year's worth of water onto it in a single day. Instead, you water it regularly. Little by little, the plant grows stronger. Learning English works the same way. Daily practice creates steady improvement. A good English learning routine does not need to be complicated. In fact, simple routines are often the most effective. The goal is to create habits that you can follow every day without feeling overwhelmed. Let us look at a sample routine. In the morning, you might spend 10 or 15 minutes reviewing vocabulary. Learn a few new words and practice using them in simple sentences. You do not need to memorize dozens of words at once. A small number of useful words is enough. For example, you might learn words such as opportunity, improve, practice, confident, and success. After learning them, try using them in sentences. During the day, look for opportunities to use English. Read a short article, listen to a podcast, watch a video, or practice speaking. Even 10 or 20 minutes can make a difference. The important thing is to keep English present in your daily life. I remember a time when I thought I needed long study sessions to make progress. Then I discovered that short daily practice was often more effective. 15 minutes every day helped me more than several hours once a week. Consistency created momentum. In the evening, spend some time reviewing what you learned during the day. Look at your vocabulary notes. Fatsu. Read a short passage. Review any new expressions you encountered. This review strengthens your memory and prepares your brain for sleep. Now comes the nighttime part of the routine. Before going to bed, choose a simple English recording. It could be a story, a vocabulary lesson, a graded reader, or a beginner-friendly conversation. Make sure the audio is calm and easy to understand. Play the recording at a comfortable volume. The goal is not to force yourself to stay awake and concentrate. The goal is to relax while surrounding yourself with English. Some learners listen for 15 minutes before sleeping. Others allow the recording to continue quietly throughout the night. A learner named Sana created a routine like this. Every morning, she learned 5 new words. During the day, she practiced reading and listening. At night, she listened to simple English stories while falling asleep. She followed this routine for several months. Gradually, her vocabulary expanded, her listening improved, and her confidence grew. One reason routines work so well is that they reduce decision-making. When you know exactly what you will do. Each day, you spend less time wondering how to study. Your routine becomes automatic. Think about brushing your teeth. Most people do not spend time deciding whether to brush their teeth every morning. It is simply part of their routine. Your English practice can become the same way. Once the habit is established, it feels natural. Another important part of a successful routine is setting realistic goals. Some learners create goals that are too large. They promise themselves they will study 3 hours every day. After a few days, they become tired and stop completely. Instead, start with small goals. Learn 5 new words each day. Read 1 page. Listen to a short story. Practice speaking for 10 minutes. Small goals are easier to maintain, and consistent progress adds up over time. Let me tell you about Ahmed. At first, he wanted to learn 50 new words every day. After 1 week, he felt overwhelmed. Then he changed his goal to 5 words per day. This seemed small, but he could do it consistently. By the end of the year, he had learned hundreds of useful words. Small steps created big results. It is also important to track your progress. Keep a notebook or journal. Write down the words you learn. Record your achievements. Celebrate small successes. Every new word, every completed story, and every conversation is evidence of progress. Sometimes you may feel that your improvement is slow. This is normal. Language learning is a long journey. There will be days when progress feels invisible. However, if you continue practicing, the results will appear. I remember feeling stuck at certain points during my own language learning journey. It seemed like nothing was improving. Then one day, I realized I could understand conversations that once seemed impossible. Impossible! Progress had been happening all along, even when I could not see it. Another useful tip is to make your routine enjoyable. Choose stories that interest you. Listen to topics you enjoy. Read about subjects you love. The more enjoyable your learning becomes, the easier it is to stay consistent. Remember that learning English while sleeping is only one part of the process. The most successful learners combine nighttime listening with active daytime practice. Together, these habits create a strong learning system. As we finish this chapter, remember that great results come from simple daily actions. A few minutes of vocabulary study, some reading and listening during the day, and gentle English exposure before sleep can create powerful long-term improvement. Consistency is more important than intensity. Small efforts repeated every day can transform your English skills over time. Chapter 8. Common mistakes when learning English. While sleeping and how to avoid them. We will talk about the most common mistakes learners make when trying to learn English while sleeping and how to avoid them. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Imran was excited when he first heard about learning English while sleeping. He believed it was a shortcut to fluency. He imagined that after a few weeks, he would wake up speaking English effortlessly. Because of this belief, he stopped studying during the day and relied only on nighttime listening. After several months, he became disappointed. His English had not improved as much as he expected. He felt confused and frustrated. Then he realized his mistake. Learning while sleeping can support language learning, but it cannot replace active study. Once he returned to reading, listening, speaking, and writing during the day, his progress improved significantly. This is the first and perhaps biggest mistake many learners make. They expect sleep listening to do all the work. It is important to remember that language learning requires active participation. You need to read English. You need to listen carefully. You need to practice speaking and writing. Nighttime listening is simply an additional tool that supports these activities. Think about exercise. Imagine someone buys a pair of running shoes, but never goes running. The shoes alone cannot improve fitness. In the same way, listening while sleeping cannot create fluency by itself. It works best when combined with regular practice. Another common mistake is choosing audio that is too difficult. Some learners believe that advanced content will help them learn faster. They listen to complicated lectures, advanced business discussions, or fast news reports even though they understand very little. This often creates frustration. If the content is far beyond your level, your brain has very little familiar information to connect with. It is much better to choose simple material that you can understand comfortably. I remember trying to learn from content that was too difficult. I thought challenging myself was always the best approach. Confused and discouraged. When I switched to easier material, I learned more effectively because I could actually follow the content. Another mistake is playing the audio too loudly. Some learners think louder audio means better learning. However, if the sound disturbs your sleep, it may do more harm than good. Good sleep is essential for memory and learning. If you wake up repeatedly during the night because the audio is too loud, you may feel tired the next day. Poor sleep can reduce concentration, memory, and motivation. A learner named Sarah experienced this problem. She set her recordings at a high volume because she wanted to hear every word. Instead of helping her, the audio kept waking her up. Once she lowered the volume, her sleep improved, and the experience became much more pleasant. Another mistake is constantly changing learning materials. Some learners listen to a different recording every single night. They never give themselves time to become familiar with the content. While variety can be useful, repetition is extremely valuable. Hearing the same story several times allows your brain to notice details that it missed before. Familiarity helps strengthen memory and improve understanding. Think about your favorite song. The first time you hear it, you may only remember a few words. After listening many times, you know the lyrics and melody. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity supports learning. Another common mistake is being impatient. Many learners expect dramatic improvements after a few nights or a few weeks. When quick results do not appear, they lose motivation. Language learning takes time. Improvement often happens gradually. Sometimes progress is so slow that you do not notice it right away. Then one day, you suddenly realize you understand more than before. A student named Fatima experienced this. For months, she felt like her listening skills were not improving. Then she watched a video that once seemed difficult and realized she understood most of it. Her progress had been happening little by little all along. Another mistake is ignoring pronunciation practice. Some learners listen to English every night but never practice speaking. Listening is important, but speaking is also necessary. Imagine someone who watches cooking videos every day but never enters a kitchen. They may learn many recipes, but they will not become a skilled cook without practice. Language works the same way. Listening helps, but speaking turns knowledge into ability. Try repeating sentences out loud during the day. Read stories aloud. Practice conversations. Use the language actively whenever possible. Another mistake is studying for too long without taking breaks. Some learners become so excited that they try to study for many hours every day. After a short period, they feel exhausted and lose motivation. Balance is important. Short, consistent study sessions are often more effective than long periods of intense study. A routine that you can maintain for months is much better than a routine you can maintain for only a week. I learned this lesson myself. There were times when I studied too much and became tired. Eventually, I realized that steady daily practice produced better long-term results than occasional bursts of intense effort. Some learners also make the mistake of comparing themselves to others. They see someone who speaks English fluently and feel discouraged. They wonder why their own progress seems slower. Remember that every learner has a unique journey. People learn at different speeds. They have different backgrounds, experiences, and opportunities. The only comparison that truly matters is the comparison between who you are today and who you were yesterday. If you know more English today than you did last month, you are making progress. That progress deserves recognition and celebration. Another mistake is focusing only on weaknesses. Some learners constantly think about what they cannot do. They focus on mistakes and ignore their achievements. A more helpful approach is to notice your progress. Celebrate the new words you learn. Celebrate the stories you understand. Celebrate every small improvement. These small victories build confidence and motivation. As we finish this chapter, remember that mistakes are part of learning. Everyone makes them. The important thing is to learn from them and continue moving forward. Choose audio that matches your level. Keep the volume comfortable. Be patient. Practice actively during the day. Use repetition wisely. Most importantly, remember that learning English is a journey, not a race. Chapter 9. Building confidence through consistent English exposure. We will discuss something that many learners struggle with. We will talk about confidence and how consistent exposure to English can help you feel more comfortable and less afraid when using the language. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Hamza had studied English for several years. He knew many grammar rules and had learned a large number of vocabulary words. However, whenever someone spoke to him in English, he became nervous. His mind went blank. He worried about making mistakes. He worried that people would laugh at him. As a result, he often stayed silent, even when he knew the answer. One day, Hamza decided to change his approach. Instead of focusing only on grammar exercises, he started surrounding himself with English every day. He listened to stories, watched simple videos, read short articles, and played English recordings before sleeping. He did not try to become perfect. He simply increased his exposure to the language. After several months, something interesting happened. English no longer felt like a stranger. The language became familiar. When someone spoke to him in English, he felt calmer. He still made mistakes, but he was less afraid of them. His confidence began to grow. Now let us talk about confidence. Many people think confidence comes after you become fluent. They believe they must learn everything first, and then confidence will appear. In reality, confidence often develops before fluency. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you may feel nervous. You might fall a few times, but as you practice, you become more comfortable. Your confidence grows because of experience, not perfection. Language learning works the same way. The more often you hear English, the more familiar it becomes. Familiarity reduces fear. When your brain recognizes words, sounds, and sentence patterns, you feel more relaxed. This is one reason why regular exposure is so powerful. I remember learning a language and feeling nervous whenever I heard native speakers. Their speech seemed fast and difficult, but after months of listening to stories and conversations, something changed. The sounds became familiar. I did not understand everything, but I felt less intimidated. That familiarity gave me confidence. Nighttime listening can contribute to this process. When you hear English regularly, even during sleep, your brain receives additional exposure to the language. The words, phrases, and sounds become more familiar over time. Familiarity creates comfort, and comfort often leads to confidence. Imagine hearing the phrase, "How are you today?" hundreds of times. Eventually, it feels completely natural. You no longer need to think about it. The same thing happens with many common English expressions. Repeated exposure helps them become part of your mental library. A learner named Amina experienced this herself. She often felt nervous during English conversations. To become more comfortable, she listened to simple dialogues every night. The dialogues included greetings, introductions, and everyday questions. After several months, she noticed that these common expressions no longer felt difficult. When people used them in real conversations, she recognized them immediately. Another reason exposure builds confidence is that it helps reduce uncertainty. Fear often comes from unfamiliarity. When something is new, it can feel intimidating, but when you encounter it repeatedly, it becomes less frightening. Think about moving to a new neighborhood. During the first week, everything feels unfamiliar. The streets, buildings, and people are all new. After living there for several months, the neighborhood feels comfortable. You know where things are. You recognize familiar faces. The same principle applies to English. The more time you spend with the language, the more comfortable it becomes. English starts feeling like a familiar place rather than a confusing challenge. Another important aspect of confidence is accepting mistakes. Many learners believe they must speak perfectly. This belief creates pressure and anxiety. In reality, mistakes are a natural part of learning. I made many mistakes when learning languages. Sometimes I used the wrong word. Sometimes I mispronounced something. Sometimes I misunderstood a conversation. These experiences were not signs of failure. They were signs of learning. Every fluent speaker has made mistakes. Every confident speaker has experienced moments of confusion. The difference is that they continued practicing despite those mistakes. A learner named Bilal used to stop speaking whenever he made an error. He felt embarrassed and wanted to avoid further mistakes. Eventually, he realized that mistakes were helping him improve. Once he accepted this fact, his confidence increased dramatically. Another way to build confidence is by celebrating small successes. Many learners focus only on big goals. They want perfect pronunciation, advanced vocabulary, or complete fluency. While these goals are important, they can take a long time to achieve. Instead, notice the small victories along the way. Did you understand a new word today? Did you finish an English story? Did you recognize a phrase in a movie? These achievements matter. They show that progress is happening. I remember feeling proud the first time I understood an entire conversation without needing help. It was not a complicated conversation, but it felt like a major achievement. Small successes provide motivation and remind us that we are improving. Consistency is another key factor. Confidence grows through repeated experiences. If you interact with English once a month, progress may feel slow. But if you interact with English every day, even for a short time, familiarity and confidence develop much faster. This is why creating a daily routine is so valuable. Every story you listen to, every article you read, and every recording you hear before sleep contributes to your growth. Each exposure strengthens your relationship with the language. Remember that confidence is not the absence of mistakes. Confidence is the willingness to continue despite mistakes. You do not need perfect English to communicate. You only need the courage to use what you know and the determination to keep learning. As we finish this chapter, remember that confidence is built one day at a time. Every moment you spend listening, reading, speaking, and learning helps English feel more natural. Nighttime listening can become one small part of this process by increasing your exposure and helping the language feel familiar. Over time, familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes confidence, and confidence helps you move closer to fluency. Chapter 10. Growing your vocabulary naturally through repeated listening. We will learn how vocabulary grows naturally through repeated exposure and why hearing words in context can make them easier to remember and use. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Yasir wanted to improve his English vocabulary. He bought a notebook and started memorizing long lists of words every day. He spent hours trying to remember definitions. At first, he felt productive. However, after a few weeks, he realized that he could remember many words on paper but struggled to use them in conversations. One day, Yasir changed his strategy. Instead of focusing only on word lists, He started listening to simple English stories. He heard words being used in real situations. He listened to conversations, dialogues, and short stories before sleeping. Gradually, he noticed that words stayed in his memory longer. More importantly, he understood how to use them naturally. This experience teaches an important lesson. Vocabulary is not just about knowing definitions. It is about understanding how words are used in real life. Now, let us talk about context. Context means the situation in which a word appears. When you learn a word by itself, it can feel isolated. But when you hear it inside a story or conversation, the meaning becomes clearer. For example, imagine you learn the word hungry. You could simply memorize the definition. However, imagine hearing a sentence like this: I did not eat breakfast this morning, so now I am very hungry. The situation helps explain the meaning. You understand not only the definition, but also how the word is used naturally. This is why stories are such powerful learning tools. Stories provide context. They show relationships between words. They help learners understand meaning without always relying on translation. I remember learning new words through stories rather than vocabulary lists. Sometimes I forgot words that I memorized directly, but I often remembered words that appeared in interesting stories. The story created a connection in my mind, making the vocabulary easier to recall. Repeated listening. When you hear the same word many times in different situations, your understanding grows deeper. Imagine hearing the word journey in a travel story. Later, you hear it in a podcast. Then you hear it again in a conversation. Each encounter strengthens your familiarity with the word. Eventually, it becomes a natural part of your vocabulary. A learner named Hina experienced this herself. She often listened to simple travel stories before sleeping. At first, she noticed words like airport, ticket, journey, luggage, and passport. She heard them repeatedly in different recordings. After several months, these words felt completely familiar. She no longer needed to stop and think about their meanings. Another advantage of repeated listening is that it helps you learn phrases, not just individual words. Native speakers often use groups of words together. These combinations are called expressions or phrases. For example, English speakers often say, take a break, make a decision, have a good day. These phrases are easier to learn when you hear them repeatedly in real conversations. Pats. Instead of memorizing each word separately, you learn the entire expression as a unit. Think about how children learn language. They do not usually study long vocabulary lists. They hear words and phrases repeatedly in meaningful situations. Over time, those words become part of their everyday language. Adult learners can benefit from a similar approach. By listening regularly, you expose yourself to useful vocabulary in natural contexts. This makes learning feel more intuitive and enjoyable. Let me tell you about another learner named Ali. He loved listening to simple English stories at night. One story included the phrase, looking forward to. At first, he did not fully understand it. However, the phrase appeared many times in different recordings. I am looking forward to the weekend. I am looking forward to meeting you. We are looking forward to our trip. After hearing it repeatedly, Ollie began understanding its meaning naturally. Eventually, he started using it in his own conversations. Another reason repeated listening helps vocabulary growth is that it reduces pressure. Many learners become stressed when trying to memorize hundreds of words. They feel like they must remember everything immediately. Listening creates a different experience. Instead of forcing information into your memory, you allow familiarity to develop gradually. Each encounter strengthens recognition. Over time, recognition becomes understanding, and understanding becomes active vocabulary. Of course, active practice is still important. If you learn a new word through listening, try using it during the day. Write a sentence with it. Say it aloud. Include it in a conversation. The more you use a word, the stronger your memory becomes. For example, if you learn the word confident, you might create sentences such as, I feel confident about my English. She is a confident speaker. Practice helps people become more confident. Using vocabulary actively transforms passive knowledge into real communication skills. Another useful strategy is keeping a vocabulary journal. Whenever you hear an interesting word, write it down along with an example sentence. Reviewing these notes regularly can strengthen your learning even further. I used to keep a small notebook filled with new words and phrases. Whenever I encountered something useful, I wrote it down. Looking back through those pages showed me how much my vocabulary had grown over time. Remember that vocabulary growth is often gradual. You may not notice dramatic changes from one week to the next. However, if you continue listening consistently, the results accumulate. Words that once seemed unfamiliar become recognizable. Expressions that once felt confusing become clear. Think of vocabulary as a collection of seeds. Every story you hear plants new seeds in your mind. Some grow quickly, others take longer. With enough exposure, repetition, and practice, those seeds develop into a rich and useful vocabulary. As we finish this chapter, remember that learning vocabulary does not have to feel difficult or stressful. Through repeated listening, stories, conversations, and regular exposure, words can become familiar naturally. Nighttimes listening can support this process by increasing English and helping useful vocabulary stay active in your mind. Chapter 11. Understanding common phrases and everyday conversations. Through sleep listening, we will learn how listening to English regularly can help you understand common phrases, axed, everyday expressions. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Noman had a good vocabulary. He knew many English words and could understand simple texts. However, he often became confused when speaking with native speakers. The problem was not the individual words. The problem was the phrases. One day, someone said to him, "Take your time." Noman understood the words take, your, and time, but he was confused by the meaning of the entire phrase. Why was someone telling him to take time? Later, he heard another expression. Hang on a minute. Again, he knew the individual words, but the meaning was not immediately clear. Noman realized that learning English was not only about learning words. It was also about learning how words work together in everyday speech. Now, let us talk about phrases. A phrase is a group of words that people often use together. Native speakers use thousands of common phrases every day. These expressions make conversations sound natural and fluent. For example, how's it going? See you later. No problem. Take care. Good luck. These phrases appear constantly in English conversations. If you hear them often enough, they become familiar and easy to understand. I remember learning a new language and feeling surprised by how many common expressions people used. Even when I knew all the individual words, some phrases still confused me. However, after hearing them repeatedly, they became natural. I no longer needed to translate them in my mind. This is where repeated listening becomes extremely valuable. Every time you hear a common phrase, your brain becomes more familiar with it. Eventually, you recognize the phrase instantly. Imagine hearing the expression, no problem, hundreds of times in different conversations. After a while, you do not need to analyze the words. You simply understand the meaning immediately. A learner named Sarah experienced this herself. She listened to simple English dialogues before sleeping every night. The dialogues included common expressions such as, "Excuse me, you're welcome. I understand. That sounds great." At first, she noticed these phrases but did not pay much attention to them. Not. After hearing them repeatedly, they became part of her natural understanding of English. Another benefit of listening to conversations is learning how people respond in different situations. Language is not only about what people say, it is also about how conversations flow. For example, how are you? I'm doing well, thank you. What are your plans for the weekend? I'm going to visit my family. These conversation patterns appear again and again in everyday English. When you hear them frequently, they begin to feel familiar. Think about how children learn language. They hear similar conversations every day. Through repetition, they learn how people greet each other, ask questions, and respond naturally. The same principle works for adult learners. By listening regularly, you expose yourself to real communication patterns. This helps you understand how English is actually used. Another important aspect of conversation is connected speech. Native speakers often connect words together. They do not always pronounce every word separately. For example, the phrase, "What are you doing?" may sound more like "Wadaya doing?" to a beginner's ear. This can make conversations difficult to understand at first. However, repeated exposure helps your ears adjust to these natural speech patterns. A learner named Ahmed struggled with this problem. Whenever he watched English videos, the speakers seemed too fast. He felt like words disappeared into each other. To improve, he listened to simple English conversations every day and before sleeping. After several months, he noticed that speech sounded clearer. Native speakers had not slowed down. Instead, his listening skills had improved. This is one of the hidden benefits of regular exposure. Your brain becomes better at recognizing patterns. Conversations that once seemed confusing become easier to follow. Another useful thing you learn from conversations is tone. Tone refers to how something is said. For example, the phrase, really can express surprise, excitement, curiosity, or doubt depending on the speaker's tone. By listening to real conversations, you learn these subtle differences. This helps you understand not only the words but also the speaker's feelings and intentions. Let me tell you about another learner named Yesha. She enjoyed listening to simple conversational podcasts before bed. Over time, she became better at understanding emotions in English. She could hear when people were happy, worried, excited, or joking. This made conversations feel much more meaningful. Another advantage of learning through conversations is that you acquire useful expressions naturally. For example, I can't wait. That makes sense. I'll think about it. Sounds good. These expressions appear frequently in everyday speech. Instead of memorizing them from a textbook, you hear them being used naturally by real speakers. The more often you hear them, the more comfortable they become. Eventually, you may start using them yourself. Of course, listening alone is not enough. During the day, try using these expressions whenever possible. If you learn the phrase, "sounds good," try saying it during conversations. If you hear "I'll think about it," practice using it in your own sentences. Active use strengthens what listening introduces. Another important thing to remember is patience. Understanding natural conversations takes time. At first, many expressions may seem confusing. Some phrases may not make sense immediately. This is completely normal. The key is continued exposure. Every conversation you hear teaches you something new. Every dialogue helps your brain recognize another pattern. Little by little, understanding grows. I remember reaching a point where conversations that once felt impossible suddenly became understandable. The change did not happen overnight. It happened through months of listening, repetition, and practice. As we finish this chapter, remember that English is more than vocabulary and grammar. It is also a collection of common phrases, natural expressions, and conversation patterns. Listening regularly helps you become familiar with these patterns and makes everyday English easier to understand. Nighttime listening can support this process by providing additional exposure and helping common expressions become part of your natural understanding. Chapter 12. Why stories are one of the most powerful tools for learning English. While sleeping, we will talk about one of the most effective tools for language learning. We will explore why stories are so powerful and how they can help you improve your English while you sleep. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Khalid struggled to stay motivated. He tried memorizing vocabulary lists and studying grammar rules, but he often became bored. Learning felt like hard work. One evening, he decided to listen to a simple English story instead. The story was about a young traveler who wanted to explore the world. It was not complicated. The vocabulary was simple, and the sentences were easy to understand. Yet Khalid found himself completely interested. He wanted to know what would happen next. After listening to the story several times, he noticed something surprising. He remembered many of the words and phrases without trying to memorize them. The story had helped the language stay in his mind. This experience shows why stories are such powerful teachers. Now let us talk about why stories work so well. Human beings have loved stories for thousands of years. Long before there were schools, people shared knowledge through storytelling. Stories help us remember information because they create connections. Think about learning 10 random words from a list. You might remember some of them for a short time, but many may quickly disappear from your memory. Now imagine hearing those same words inside an interesting story. Suddenly, the words have meaning. They become part of a situation, a character, or an event. For example, imagine learning the words river, bridge, village, traveler, and journey. If you study them separately, they may feel disconnected. But now imagine a story. A traveler crossed a bridge near a small village. Beyond the village, he followed a river as he continued his journey. The words now belong together. The story creates a picture in your mind, making the vocabulary easier to understand and remember. I remember learning languages through stories. Sometimes I forgot vocabulary lists after a few days. However, I often remembered words that appeared in memorable stories. The story gave the words meaning, and meaning helped me remember them. Another reason stories are effective is that they provide repetition naturally. In a good story, important words and ideas often appear more than once. This repetition strengthens memory without feeling boring. Imagine a story about a young girl who wants to become a doctor. Throughout the story, you repeatedly hear words such as study, hospital, patient, doctor, and dream. Because these words appear naturally, you learn them without feeling like you are studying. A learner named Miriam discovered this herself. She listened to simple English stories every night before sleeping. At first, she focused mainly on understanding the plot. After several weeks, she noticed that certain words appeared again and again. These words gradually became part of her vocabulary. Stories also help learners understand grammar naturally. Many students worry about grammar rules. They try to memorize complicated explanations and become frustrated. Stories provide another way to learn. When you hear correct English repeatedly, your brain begins to recognize patterns. You start noticing how sentences are formed. For example, after hearing many sentences such as, "He walked to school," "She visited her grandmother," "They played football together," you naturally become familiar with how English describes past actions. You may not even think about grammar rules. Instead, you absorb patterns through exposure. Another wonderful thing about stories is that they engage emotions. When we care about characters and events, we pay more attention. Emotional connections help strengthen memory. Think about your favorite movie or book. You probably remember many details because the story made you feel something. Language learning works in a similar way. When a story is interesting, your brain becomes more involved. A learner named Ahmed loved adventure stories. Every night, he listened to simple tales about explorers, treasure hunters, and travelers. Because he enjoyed the stories, he listened consistently. Over time, his vocabulary and listening skills improved significantly. Stories are also excellent for reducing stress. Some learners become anxious when studying. They worry about making mistakes or forgetting information. Stories create a more relaxed learning experience. Sifture. Instead of focusing on tests and rules, you focus on enjoying the story. Learning happens naturally as you follow the characters and events. This relaxed approach is especially helpful before sleep. Calm stories help you unwind while surrounding yourself with English. They create a peaceful environment that supports both relaxation and language. Exposure. Another advantage of stories is that they introduce useful everyday language. Characters talk to each other. They ask questions, solve problems, and share experiences. Through these interactions, you hear common expressions and natural sentence patterns. For example, "Where are you going? I'm looking for my friend. Can you help me? Thank you very much." These expressions appear frequently in stories and conversations. The more often you hear them, the more familiar they become. It is also important to choose stories that match your level. Beginners should start with simple stories that use common vocabulary and short sentences. Intermediate learners can gradually move to longer and more detailed stories. Remember that understanding every word is not necessary. Focus on understanding the main idea. As your skills improve, your understanding will grow naturally. I learned this lesson myself. At first, I worried whenever I encountered unfamiliar words. Then I realized that understanding the general meaning was enough. Over time, repeated exposure helped me learn many new words without stress. Another useful tip is to listen to the same story multiple times. The first time, focus on the overall story. The second time, notice new vocabulary. The third time, pay attention to pronunciation and sentence patterns. Each was something new. As we finish this chapter, remember that stories are one of the most powerful tools in language learning. They combine vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and context into a meaningful experience. They make learning enjoyable and memorable. When used as part of a nighttime listening routine, stories can provide valuable exposure to English while helping you relax and prepare for sleep. In the next chapter, we will explore how consistency transforms small daily efforts into remarkable long-term progress and why successful learners focus on habits rather than quick results. Chapter 13. The Power of Consistency and Why Small Daily Efforts Create Big Results. We will learn why consistency matters more than intensity and how small daily efforts can create remarkable results over time. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Usman wanted to become fluent in English as quickly as possible. He was highly motivated and decided to study for 5 hours every day. During the first week, he worked very hard. He read books, watched videos, memorized vocabulary, and completed grammar exercises. However, after a short time, he became tired. Studying for so many hours every day was difficult to maintain. Eventually, he started skipping study sessions. One missed day became 2 days. 2 days became a week. Before long, his learning routine disappeared completely. At the same time, another learner named Noir followed a different approach. She studied only 30 minutes a day. Some days she listened to a story. Ashers. Other days she reviewed vocabulary or practiced speaking. Every night, She listened to simple English audio before sleeping. Her progress seemed slow at first. However, she continued month after month. By the end of the year, her English had improved dramatically. What made the difference? The answer was consistency. Now let us talk about why consistency is so powerful. Imagine planting a tree. You cannot plant a seed today and expect a giant tree tomorrow. Growth happens gradually. Every day, the tree receives sunlight and water. Little by little, it becomes stronger. Language learning works. Every word you learn, every story you hear, and every conversation you practice adds something valuable to your progress. These small improvements may seem insignificant at first, but they accumulate over time. I remember feeling impatient when learning a language. I wanted immediate results. I wanted to understand everything quickly. However, language does not work that way. Real progress comes from steady effort repeated over long periods. Think about learning 5 new words every day. 5 words may not sound impressive. Some learners might think it is too little. But let us do a simple calculation. 5 words per day equals 35 words per week. 35 words per week equals more than 150 words per month. Over a year, that becomes thousands of new words. Small daily efforts create big results when repeated consistently. A learner named Fatima experienced this herself. She decided to learn just 5 useful words every day. At first, the goal seemed almost too easy. However, because it was easy, she rarely missed a day. After a year, she was amazed by how much her vocabulary had grown. Another reason consistency works is that it strengthens habits. Habits are actions that become automatic through repetition. Think about brushing your teeth. Most people do not need motivation to brush their teeth every day. It has become part of their routine. The same thing can happen with English learning. When you study regularly, learning becomes a habit rather than a struggle. You no longer spend energy deciding whether to practice. You simply do it because it is part of your day. This is why many successful learners focus on habits instead of motivation. Motivation is helpful, but it comes and goes. Some days you feel excited. Other days you do not. Habits continue even when motivation is low. I remember days when I did not feel like studying. If I relied only on motivation, I would have skipped practice. Instead, I followed my routine. Even a few minutes of study helped maintain momentum. Nighttime listening fits perfectly into this idea. Once it becomes part of your bedtime routine, it requires very little effort. You simply press play and allow English to become part of your daily environment. Another advantage of consistency is that it improves memory. Every time you review information, you strengthen the connections in your brain. Imagine learning the word achievement. If you hear it only once, you may forget it. But if you encounter it repeatedly over several weeks, the word becomes familiar. Eventually, remembering it. Consistency turns our weak memories into strong memories. A learner named Hassan used to study large amounts of vocabulary in a single session. He often forgot much of what he learned. Later, he switched to shorter daily study sessions with regular review. His retention improved significantly because he encountered the words repeatedly over time. Consistency also reduces stress. Many learners create unrealistic expectations. They believe they must study for hours every day. When they cannot maintain that schedule, they feel guilty and discouraged. A more sustainable approach is to set manageable goals. For example, read 1 page, learn 5 words, listen to 1 short story, practice speaking for 10 minutes. These goals are simple enough to complete even on busy days. Consistency matters more than perfection. Another important lesson is that progress is often invisible at first. Imagine saving a small amount of money every day. During the first week, the amount may seem insignificant. After several months, the savings become much more noticeable. Language learning follows a similar pattern. Daily improvements may feel small, but over months and years, they create impressive results. A learner named Amina often felt like her English was not improving. Then she looked back at her old notebook from 6 months earlier. She realized she could now understand material that once seemed impossible. The progress had been gradual, but it was real. One useful strategy is to focus on the process instead of the outcome. Instead of constantly asking, "Am I fluent yet?" ask yourself, "Did I practice today?" The process is something you can control. Fluency is the result of many successful days of practice. I learned this lesson through experience. Whenever I focused only on distant goals, I became impatient. When I focused on daily habits, learning felt more enjoyable and less stressful. Remember that every small action matters. Every page you read, every story you hear increases your exposure. Every conversation you practice improves your confidence. These actions may seem small individually, but together they create powerful results. As we finish this chapter, remember that success in English learning does not come from occasional bursts of effort. It comes from consistent action repeated over time. Small daily habits are stronger than rare moments of intense study. Whether you are reading, listening, speaking, writing, or learning English while sleeping, consistency is the key that transforms effort into achievement. Read. We will explore how patience and realistic expectations can help you. Stay motivated throughout your English learning journey and avoid the frustration that causes many learners to give up. Chapter 4. The importance of patience and realistic expectations in language learning. We will talk about patience and why realistic expectations can help you stay motivated throughout your learning journey. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Ibrahim was excited to improve his English. He watched videos about language learning and heard stories about people becoming fluent. In a short period of time, inspired by these stories, he expected very fast results. For several weeks, Ibrahim studied hard. He learned new vocabulary, listened to English recordings before sleeping, and practiced every day. However, after 1 month, he became frustrated. He still made mistakes. He still needed subtitles for some videos. He still struggled with certain conversations. Because his expectations were unrealistic, he felt disappointed even though he was making progress. One day, his teacher shared some advice. The teacher said, Language learning is not a race. It is a journey. Focus on improvement, not perfection. Those words changed Ibrahim's perspective. Instead of expecting instant fluency, he began appreciating small improvements. As a result, he enjoyed learning more and stayed motivated. Now let us talk about patience. Patience means understanding that meaningful progress takes time. Many things in life require patience. A farmer plants seeds and waits for crops to grow. A musician practices for years before becoming highly skilled. An athlete trains regularly before achieving success. Language learning follows the same principle. Imagine trying to build a house. You cannot complete the entire house in a single day. First, you build the foundation, then the walls, then the roof. Step by step, the house takes shape. English learning is similar. Vocabulary, grammar, listening, speaking, reading, and writing all develop gradually. Each skill builds upon the others. I remember feeling impatient when learning a language. I wanted to understand every conversation immediately. I wanted to speak perfectly without hesitation. But the reality was different. Progress came little by little. Looking back, I realized that patience was one of the most valuable skills I developed. One reason learners become impatient is that they compare themselves to fluent speakers. They see someone speaking confidently and assume that person learned quickly. What they often do not see are the years of practice behind that fluency. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once struggled with pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar. A learner named Sana often compared herself to advanced English speakers. She felt discouraged because her English was not at the same level. Then she realized something important. Comparing her beginning to someone else's years of experience was unfair. Instead, she started comparing herself to her past self. She asked questions like, "Do I know more words than last month? Can I understand more than before? Am I more confident than I was 6 months ago?" The answers were yes. This change in perspective helped her stay motivated. Another important lesson is that progress is not always visible. Sometimes improvement happens slowly. You may practice every day and feel like nothing is changing. Then one day, something surprising happens. You understand a conversation that once seemed impossible. You read a page without using a dictionary. You speak a sentence without translating it in your mind. These moments are signs that progress has been happening all along. A learner named Bilal experienced this. More shocks. For months, he listened to English stories before sleeping and practiced during the day. He often felt like his listening skills were improving very slowly. Then one evening, he watched a video that had confused him several months earlier. To his surprise, he understood most of it. His progress had been gradual, but it was real. This is why patience is so important. Growth often happens quietly. Another challenge learners face is expecting perfection. Some people believe they should never make mistakes. Every error feels like failure. In reality, mistakes are part of learning. Think about a child learning to walk. The child falls many times before walking confidently. No one expects perfection from the beginning. Language learning works the same way. Mistakes are evidence that you are trying. They show that you are practicing and expanding your abilities. I made countless mistakes while learning languages. Sometimes I mispronounced words. Sometimes I used incorrect grammar. Sometimes I misunderstood what people said. Each mistake taught me something valuable. Instead of fearing mistakes, successful learners learn from them. Another helpful strategy is setting realistic goals. Rather than saying, I will become fluent in 1 month, try goals like, I will learn 5 new words each day. I will listen to English for 15 minutes every evening. I will finish 1 short story this week. These goals are achievable. Achievable goals create success, and success builds motivation. A learner named Ayesha used to create enormous goals for herself. She wanted to learn hundreds of words every week. Eventually, she felt overwhelmed. Later, she switched to smaller goals. She focused on consistent progress instead of dramatic results. This simple change helped her stay committed to learning. It is also important to celebrate milestones along the way. Did you complete your first English book? Celebrate it. Did you understand a movie scene without subtitles? Celebrate it. Did you have your first conversation in English? Celebrate it. These moments deserve recognition because they represent real progress. I remember feeling proud the first time I finished an entire story in another language. It was not a difficult book, but it represented months of effort. That achievement motivated me to continue learning. Another reason patience matters is that confidence develops gradually. The more exposure you have to English, the more comfortable you become. This process cannot be rushed. Nighttime listening supports this journey by providing consistent exposure. Every story you hear, every conversation you listen to, and every phrase you encounter helps make English feel more familiar. The results may not appear overnight, but they accumulate over time. Think of learning English like filling a jar with water 1 drop at a time. Each drop seems small, yet eventually the jar becomes full. Every word you learn is a drop. Every story you hear is a drop. Every conversation you practice is a drop. Day after day, those drops create meaningful progress. As we finish this chapter, remember that patience is not passive. Patience means continuing to work even when results seem slow. It means trusting the process and believing that consistent effort will lead to improvement. Set realistic expectations. Celebrate small victories. Learn from mistakes. Most importantly, remember that every fluent speaker reached fluency 1 step at a time. In the next chapter, we will explore how creating a positive learning mindset can make your English learning journey more enjoyable and help you stay motivated for the long term. Chapter 5: Creating a positive learning mindset for long-term success. We will discuss something that can make a huge difference in your success. We will talk about creating a positive learning mindset and how your attitude can influence your progress. Let me begin with a story. A learner named Kareem and another learner named Hamza started learning English at the same time. Both had similar skill levels, similar resources, and similar study routines. However, they had very different mindsets. Whenever Karam made a mistake, he became discouraged. He would say things like, "My English is terrible," or "I will never become fluent." Every mistake felt like proof that he was failing. Hamza, on the other hand, viewed mistakes differently. When he made an error, he would say, "Now I know what to improve." He treated mistakes as opportunities to learn rather than evidence of failure. After a year, both learners had improved, but Hamza enjoyed the journey much more. He felt confident, motivated, and excited to continue learning. What made the difference? Their mindset. Now let us talk about what mindset means. Mindset is the way you think about yourself, your abilities, and your challenges. Your mindset influences how you react to success, failure, and obstacles. A positive learning mindset does not mean believing that everything will be easy. It means believing that improvement is possible through effort, practice, and persistence. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. The first attempts may be difficult. You may lose balance or fall. But if you believe you can improve, you continue practicing. Eventually, riding becomes natural. Language learning follows the same pattern. I remember times when I struggled to understand conversations in a language I was learning. Sometimes I felt frustrated because progress seemed slow. However, instead of telling myself that I could not learn, I reminded myself that learning takes time. That simple change in thinking helped me continue. One of the most common negative thoughts among learners is, "I am not good at languages." This belief can become a barrier to progress. The truth is that language learning is not a special talent possessed by only a few people. It is a skill that develops through exposure, practice, and consistency. Every fluent speaker started as a beginner. Every confident speaker once struggled with vocabulary. Every advanced learner once made basic mistakes. A learner named Sarah used to believe she was bad at English. Whenever she encountered a difficult word, she felt discouraged. Then she decided to change. Instead of saying, "I cannot do this," she started saying, "I cannot do this yet." That one small word yet changed everything. It reminded her that learning is a process, not a fixed condition. Another important part of a positive mindset is focusing on progress rather than perfection. Many learners spend so much time worrying about mistakes that they forget to notice improvement. Imagine a traveler walking toward a distant mountain. If the traveler looks only at the mountain, the journey may seem endless. But if the traveler occasionally looks back, they can see how they have already come. Language learners should do the same. Take time to notice your progress. Can you understand more English than last year? Can you recognize more words? Can you follow conversations more easily? Can you read faster? These improvements matter. A learner named Ali kept a notebook where he recorded new vocabulary and learning milestones. Whenever he felt discouraged, he reviewed his old notes. Seeing his progress reminded him how much he had achieved. Another helpful habit is replacing negative self-talk with encouraging thoughts. For example, instead of saying, "I always make mistakes," try saying, "I am learning from my mistakes." Instead of saying, "My pronunciation is terrible," try saying, My pronunciation is improving with practice. The words you say to yourself matter. They influence your confidence and motivation. I learned this lesson through experience. During difficult periods of learning, encouraging myself helped me continue. Negative thoughts created stress. Positive thoughts created persistence. A positive mindset also means being willing to step outside your comfort zone. Many learners avoid speaking because they fear embarrassment. They worry about making mistakes in front of others. However, growth often happens outside your comfort zone. The first conversation may feel uncomfortable. The first presentation may feel scary. The first attempt at speaking with a native speaker may feel intimidating. But each experience makes you stronger. A learner named Fatima was terrified of speaking English. For months, she focused only on reading and listening. Eventually, she challenged herself to have short conversations. At first, she made many mistakes, but she continued. Over time, her confidence grew, and speaking became much easier. Another important aspect of mindset is gratitude. Instead of focusing only on what you have not achieved, appreciate the opportunities you have to learn. You have access to stories. You have access to recordings. You have access to books, videos, and conversations. Every learning opportunity is valuable. Gratitude helps transform learning from a stressful obligation into an enjoyable experience. Nighttime listening can support this positive mindset. Every evening, as you listen to English stories or conversations, remind yourself that each exposure is helping you grow. You do not need immediate results. You simply need consistent effort. Trust the process. Trust your practice. Trust your ability to improve. Remember that learning English is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming better than you were yesterday. Some days will feel productive. Some days will feel difficult. Both types of days are part of the journey. The learners who succeed are not the ones who never face challenges. They are the ones who continue despite challenges. Think of your English learning journey as a long road. Every book you read, every story you hear, every word you learn, and every conversation you practice moves you forward. Some steps may be small, but every step counts. As we finish this chapter, remember that your mindset is one of your most powerful learning tools. Believe in your ability to improve. Focus on progress rather than perfection. Learn from mistakes. Celebrate small victories. Stay patient and consistent. When you combine a positive mindset with regular practice, remarkable growth becomes possible. Chapter 6. The final message: your English journey has only just begun. We have reached the final chapter of our journey of learning English while sleeping. Throughout this book, we explored many ideas and strategies. We talked about creating the right sleep learning environment, choosing suitable audio, building vocabulary, improving listening skills, developing confidence, creating daily routines, avoiding common mistakes, staying patient, maintaining consistency, and making English a natural part of life. Now, as we come to the end of this journey together, I would like to share one final message. Your English journey is not ending here. In many ways, it is only beginning. Let me start with a story. A learner named Omar dreamed of becoming fluent in English. When he first started learning, everything felt difficult. He struggled to understand simple conversations. Reading even short texts required effort. Speaking felt uncomfortable and sometimes embarrassing. Yet Omar continued. He listened to English every day. He practiced speaking. He learned new vocabulary. He read stories. He listened to English before sleeping. Little by little, he improved. Years later, Omar achieved something he once thought was impossible. He could communicate confidently in English. He could watch movies, read books, and have meaningful conversations. One day, someone asked him, "When did you finally finish learning English?" Omar smiled and replied, "I never finished. I simply kept learning." This answer contains an important truth. Language learning does not have a final destination. There is no moment when you suddenly know every word, understand every expression, and stop learning forever. Even native speakers continue learning throughout their lives. They discover new vocabulary. They encounter new ideas. They explore new ways of expressing themselves. Learning never truly ends. And that is something beautiful. Now let us reflect on what you have accomplished. Think back to the beginning of your English journey. Perhaps you knew very few words. Perhaps speaking felt frightening. Perhaps listening seemed impossible. Perhaps you doubted yourself. Perhaps, yet here you are. You have invested time. You have invested effort. You have invested patience. Every word you learned represents progress. Every story you listened to represents growth. Every mistake you made represents experience. And you overcame represents strength. Sometimes learners focus so much on how far they still need to go that they forget how far they have already come. Take a moment to appreciate your progress. Celebrate your effort. Recognize your achievements. They matter. I remember speaking with a learner who constantly worried about becoming fluent. He measured himself against advanced speakers and felt discouraged. One day, I asked him a simple question. Can you do things today that you could not do 1 year ago? He thought for a moment and smiled. The answer was yes. He could understand more. He could speak more confidently. Kinka, he could read more comfortably. He could express ideas that once seemed impossible. That realization changed his perspective. Instead of focusing only on the future, he began appreciating his progress. This is something I encourage you to do as well. When full. Another important lesson is to trust the power of small actions. Many people believe success comes from dramatic moments. In reality, success often comes from ordinary actions repeated consistently. A few pages read each day. A few new words learned each week. A few minutes of listening each evening. A few conversations practiced whenever possible. These small actions may seem insignificant, yet over time, they create extraordinary results. Think about a river. A river does not carve a path through rock in a single day. It does so through consistent movement, day after day, year after year. Your English improvement works the same way. Progress creates confidence. Confidence creates opportunity. Another lesson we discovered throughout this journey is that mistakes are not your enemies. Mistakes are your teachers. Every mistake shows you something new. Every correction helps you improve. Every challenge strengthens your skills. Do not fear mistakes. Learn from them. Grow through them. Continue despite them. Remember that perfection is not the goal. Communication is the goal. Connection is your goal. Growth is the goal. If people understand your message, you are succeeding. If you are learning today, you are succeeding. If you continue practicing tomorrow, you are succeeding. A learner named Ayesha once told me, "I still make mistakes." I replied, "So do fluent speakers. The difference is not the absence of mistakes. The difference is the willingness to continue." Another important lesson is curiosity. Curiosity keeps learning alive. Stay curious about words. Stay curious about stories. Stay curious about cultures. Stay curious about ideas. The more curious you become, the more enjoyable learning becomes. English is not simply a collection of grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It is a gateway to knowledge. It is a gateway to communication. It is a gateway to new friendships, opportunities, and experiences. Every book you read opens a new world. Every conversation teaches something new. Every story expands your understanding. That is why learning English can be such a rewarding journey. And what about learning English while sleeping? Throughout this book, we learned that sleep listening is not magic. It is not a shortcut that replaces active study. Instead, it is a supportive habit. It provides additional exposure. It helps create familiarity. It reinforces what you learn during the day. When combined with reading, listening, speaking, writing, and consistent practice, it can become a valuable part of your learning routine. Most importantly, it reminds us of a larger lesson. Learning does not happen only during formal study sessions. Learning happens through regular exposure. Learning happens through habits. Learning happens through consistency. As we reach the end of this book, I would like you to remember these simple principles. Be patient. Be consistent. Stay curious. Accept mistakes. Celebrate progress. Trust the process. Keep learning. Keep listening. Keep practicing. Keep believing in yourself. There will be difficult days. There will be moments of frustration. There will be times when progress feels slow. Continue anyway. Every successful learner has experienced those moments. The people who succeed are not always the most talented. Often, they are simply the people who refuse to quit. Think about where you want your English to be 1 year from now. Then ask yourself a simple question. What small action can I take today? Read 1 page. Learn 1 word. Listen to 1 story. Practice 1 conversation. Small actions create big results. And finally, remember this. You do not need perfect English to communicate. You do not need perfect English to learn. You do not need perfect English to grow. You only need the courage to continue. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for your time, your effort, and your commitment to learning. Keep listening. Keep practicing. Keep improving. And most importantly, never stop believing that progress is possible. Your English journey continues today, and the best chapters are still waiting to be written.